The morning sun cast long shadows through the stained-glass windows of St. Mary's Chapel. William sat in the front pew, his hands trembling as he clutched a worn photograph of Catherine. Her beautiful smile looked back at him from the faded image, taken on their wedding day 43 years ago. The same chapel where they had promised to love each other forever was now filled with the quiet whispers of family and friends who had come to say their final goodbye. Catherine lay peacefully in the hospital bed that had been carefully positioned near the altar. The doctors had said there was nothing more they could do. The cancer had spread too quickly, and her body was too weak to fight anymore. She had asked to spend her last days in the place where she felt closest to God, surrounded by the people who loved her most. William watched as his wife's chest rose and fell with each labored breath. The oxygen mask covered her face, but her eyes were still bright with the same warmth that had captured his heart all those years ago. She had always been the strong one in their relationship, the one who kept the family together through every challenge life had thrown their way. Their 3 children sat nearby, each lost in their own memories. Sarah, their eldest daughter, held her mother's hand gently while tears streamed down her cheeks. She remembered how Catherine had stayed up all night when she was sick as a child, reading her favorite stories until she fell asleep. Michael, their middle child, stood by the window, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He thought about all the baseball games his mother had attended, cheering louder than anyone else in the stands. Emma, their youngest, knelt beside the bed, whispering childhood memories that only she and her mother shared. The chapel was filled with flowers that Catherine had specifically requested. White lilies, her favorite, were arranged in beautiful bouquets around the room. She had planned every detail of this day months ago, wanting to spare her family the burden of making difficult decisions while they were grieving. Even in her final moments, she was taking care of everyone else. Pastor Matthews approached the family with gentle steps. He had known Catherine for over 20 years and had watched her faith grow stronger through every trial. She had volunteered at the church food bank every Tuesday, visited elderly members who could no longer attend services, and organized countless fundraisers for families in need. Her kindness had touched every person in their small community. "She's been asking for you, William," Pastor Matthews said softly. "She wants to say something important." William's heart raced as he moved closer to his wife's bedside. Catherine's eyes fluttered open, and she looked directly at him with an expression of pure love. She tried to speak, but the words came out as barely a whisper. William leaned down, placing his ear close to her lips. "The letters," she managed to say, "in the music box." For the children, William knew exactly what she meant. Years ago, Catherine had started writing letters to their children for all the important moments she might miss. Graduations, weddings, the birth of grandchildren. She had kept them hidden in her old wooden music box, the one her grandmother had given her as a young girl. The family gathered closer as Catherine struggled to remove her oxygen mask. Dr. Peterson, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward with concern. "Mrs. Anderson, you need to keep that on," he said gently, but Catherine was determined. She looked at each of her children with eyes full of love and pride. "I need them to know," she whispered, "how proud I am, how much love I'm leaving behind." Sarah squeezed her mother's hand tighter. "We know, Mom. We've always known." Catherine smiled weakly. "The garden," she continued, her voice getting softer. "Plant the roses we picked out. Every spring they'll bloom, and you'll remember that love never dies." The chapel fell silent except for the soft sound of crying. Even the strongest members of their family couldn't hold back their tears anymore. Catherine had a way of finding beauty and hope in even the darkest moments. William felt his throat tighten as he realized this might be one of the last conversations he would ever have with his wife. They had talked about this day many times over the past few months, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. He wanted to be strong for her, but the weight of losing his best friend was crushing him. "Tell me about our first dance," Catherine whispered, looking directly into William's eyes. William's voice cracked as he began to speak. "You wore your grandmother's pearls with that blue dress, the one that matched your eyes perfectly. We danced to The Way You Look Tonight, while everyone else just watched and smiled." Catherine's eyes sparkled with the memory. "You stepped on my dress twice," she said with a soft laugh. "But you didn't care," William continued. "You just kept dancing and laughing like it was the most perfect moment in the world." "It was perfect," Catherine replied. Every moment with you has been perfect." The afternoon light began to fade, and Pastor Matthew suggested they begin the prayer service that Catherine had requested. She had written out specific prayers and songs that meant the most to her. The family gathered in a circle around her bed, holding hands as they had done at dinner tables for decades. As the sun set through the chapel windows, painting the walls in shades of gold and amber, Catherine closed her eyes and prepared for the most important prayer of her life. She knew her time was running short, but she felt peaceful knowing that her family would carry her love with them forever. William sat beside her, holding her hand and trying to memorize every detail of her face. Tomorrow would bring unbearable sadness, but tonight was about celebrating a life filled with love, faith, and countless beautiful memories that would never fade away. The evening shadows grew longer as more family members arrived at the chapel. Catherine's sister Margaret had driven 3 hours from the next town, bringing with her a box of old photographs that spanned Catherine's entire life. Her brother James flew in from California, still wearing his work clothes because he had rushed to catch the first available flight. The chapel slowly filled with people who had been touched by Catherine's kindness over the years. William watched as Catherine's face lit up each time someone new entered the room. Despite her weakness, she managed to smile and acknowledge each visitor with a small nod or a gentle squeeze of their hand. Mrs. Patterson from down the street brought the apple pie that Catherine had always praised at church potlucks. The Johnson family arrived with their 3 young children, who had made handmade cards with crayon drawings of flowers and hearts. "Grandma Catherine," whispered little Amy Johnson, age 6, as she approached the bed, "I drew you a picture of heaven. It has lots of rainbows and puppies." Catherine's eyes filled with tears of joy as she looked at the colorful drawing. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she managed to say. "Will you help me hang it where I can see it?" William carefully taped the drawing to the wall where Catherine could see it without turning her head. The simple gesture brought smiles to everyone in the room, reminding them that even in sadness, there could be moments of pure love and innocence. As the evening progressed, people began sharing their favorite memories of Catherine. Her friend Betty told the story of how Catherine had organized a surprise birthday party for the church janitor, making sure he felt appreciated for all his hard work. Tom, the local grocery store owner, remembered how Catherine always asked about his grandchildren and remembered their names even months later. "She made everyone feel important," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. In a world where people are always in a hurry, Catherine always had time to listen. The stories continued late into the evening. Catherine's former students talked about how she had volunteered to tutor struggling readers at the elementary school. Her garden club friends remembered the beautiful flower arrangements she created for community events. Each story painted a picture of a woman who had lived her life in service to others, never seeking recognition but always finding ways to make the world a little brighter. Dr. Peterson checked Catherine's vital signs regularly throughout the evening. He pulled William aside during a quiet moment to prepare him for what was coming. "Her body is getting weaker," he explained gently, "but her spirit is still very strong. She's holding on because she has something important to say." William nodded, understanding that his wife was fighting to stay long enough to share her final message with the people she loved. He had seen this determination in her many times before. When Sarah was born 6 weeks premature, Catherine had refused to leave the hospital for 3 weeks until she was sure their daughter was strong enough. When Michael broke his leg in high school, she had slept in a chair beside his bed every night until he could walk again. As midnight approached, Catherine asked for her family to gather close again. Her breathing had become more shallow, but her mind was still clear. She looked at each of her children with intense love, as if she was trying to memorize their faces. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely audible, "you have your father's heart and my stubborn streak. Use both to change the world." Sarah leaned down and kissed her mother's forehead. "I promise, Mom, I'll make you proud." "Michael," Catherine continued, "your kindness is your greatest strength. Never let anyone convince you that being gentle makes you weak." Michael took his mother's hand and held it against his cheek. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for teaching me to care about people." "Emma," Catherine whispered, "you have the gift of bringing joy to others. Keep laughing, keep singing, keep spreading happiness wherever you go." Emma could barely speak through her tears. "I'll sing for you every day, Mama, just like when I was little." William felt his heart breaking as he watched his wife use her remaining strength to comfort their children one last time. She had always put their needs before her own, and even now, facing death, she was more concerned about their future than her own pain. "William," Catherine said, turning to look at her husband. "Come closer." William leaned down until his face was inches from hers. "I'm here, sweetheart." "I'm right here. 43 years wasn't enough," she whispered, "but I'm grateful for every single day we had together." "It will never be enough," William replied, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to do this without you." "You won't be without me," Catherine said with surprising strength. "Every sunset we watched together, every laugh we shared, every tear we cried. I'll be in all of those memories. And someday when it's your time, I'll be waiting for you." The room fell silent as Catherine closed her eyes to rest. Her breathing became more labored, and Dr. Peterson quietly checked his watch. Pastor Matthews began to prepare for the special prayer service that Catherine had requested. Knowing that time was running short, outside the chapel, a gentle rain began to fall, creating a soft rhythm against the windows. Catherine had always loved the sound of rain, saying it reminded her that even storms brought life to the earth. The sound seemed to bring her comfort as she prepared for her final journey. William held her hand tightly, feeling the warmth slowly leaving her fingers. He thought about all the hands they had held together, their children's hands on their first days of school, their grandchildren's tiny fingers, the hands of friends who needed comfort during their own difficult times. Catherine's hands had been instruments of love and healing throughout her entire life. The clock on the chapel wall chimed midnight as Pastor Matthews opened his worn Bible to the passages Catherine had chosen for her prayer service. The room was filled with the soft glow of candles that friends had lit throughout the evening, creating a peaceful atmosphere that seemed to embrace everyone present. Catherine had specifically requested candles instead of harsh electric lights, wanting her final hours to feel warm and comforting. "Catherine asked me to read from Psalms first," Pastor Matthews announced softly. These words brought her comfort during her illness, and she wanted to share that peace with all of you. As the familiar verses filled the chapel, Catherine's breathing seemed to steady slightly. She had memorized these passages years ago during her first battle with cancer, when the doctors had given her only 6 months to live. That was 5 years ago, and she had often said that her faith and her family's love had given her the strength to keep fighting long past what anyone expected. William remembered those dark days when they had first received the diagnosis. Catherine had cried for exactly 1 hour, then dried her tears and started making plans. She had organized their financial documents, updated their will, and written detailed instructions for everything from her funeral preferences to her secret recipe for chocolate chip cookies. But most importantly, she had doubled her efforts to create lasting memories with everyone she loved. The past 5 years had been filled with family vacations, surprise visits to old friends, and countless hours spent in this very chapel, praying for strength and guidance. Catherine had turned her illness into an opportunity to live more fully, love more deeply, and appreciate every small blessing that came her way. Mom always said that knowing her time was limited made every day more precious, Sarah whispered to her brother Michael. She never wasted a single moment feeling sorry for herself. Michael nodded, remembering how their mother had insisted on attending his college graduation, even though she was in the middle of chemotherapy treatments. She had worn a beautiful wig and smiled so brightly that no one would have guessed she was sick. When he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, she had stood up and cheered louder than anyone else in the auditorium. Dr. Peterson quietly monitored Catherine's condition while trying to stay out of the family's way. He had worked with terminal patients for over 20 years, but Catherine's grace and strength had impressed him more than any other patient he had ever treated. She had never complained about her pain, never asked why this was happening to her, and never lost hope that something good could come from even the most difficult circumstances. "Doctor," Catherine whispered, catching his attention. "Thank you for letting me come here, for letting me die with dignity in the place I love most." Dr. Peterson felt tears forming in his eyes. "It's been an honor to care for you, Catherine. You've taught me more about courage than I learned in all my years of medical school." As the prayer service continued, more people quietly entered the chapel. Word had spread throughout the small town that Catherine Anderson was saying goodbye, and many people felt compelled to pay their respects. The high school principal arrived with flowers from Catherine's former students. The librarian brought a card signed by everyone who had ever attended Catherine's monthly book club meetings. Emma looked around the crowded chapel in amazement. "Mom, look how many people came to see you," she said softly. Catherine opened her eyes and slowly turned her head to survey the room. Her face showed surprise and deep gratitude as she saw familiar faces everywhere she looked. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I never realized that I mattered to so many people." "You touched every life you encountered," Pastor Matthews said. "That's what happens when someone lives with as much love and kindness as you have." William felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection for his wife. He had always known that Catherine was special, but seeing the tangible proof of her impact on their community made him realize just how lucky he had been to share his life with such an extraordinary woman. The prayer service took on a life of its own as people began sharing spontaneous testimonies about Catherine's influence on their lives. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly widow, talked about how Catherine had brought her meals every week after her husband died. The young mother of twins shared how Catherine had babysat for free when she couldn't afford daycare. Story after story revealed the countless quiet acts of kindness that Catherine had performed without ever seeking recognition. "She never made you feel like charity," said Bobby Martinez, a teenager whose family had struggled financially. "When she brought us groceries, she always said she had bought too much and didn't want it to go to waste. She made it feel like we were doing her a favor by taking the food." Catherine listened to each story with wonder, as if she was hearing about someone else's life. She had never kept track of her good deeds or calculated the impact of her generosity. For her, helping others had been as natural as breathing, something she did because it felt right, not because she expected anything in return. As the testimonies continued, William began to understand something important about grief. Yes, he was losing the love of his life, and the pain of that loss would stay with him forever. But he was also gaining something precious: the knowledge that Catherine's love would continue to live on through all the people she had touched. Her kindness had created ripples of goodness that would spread far beyond her physical presence. "I want to say something," Catherine announced, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to her. She struggled to sit up slightly, and William quickly adjusted her pillows to help her. "I need you all to know something important," she began, her words clear despite her weakness. "I'm not sad tonight. I'm not afraid. I'm filled with gratitude for every person in this room and for every moment of love I've experienced in my life." Her eyes met William's and she smiled with the same radiance he had fallen in love with decades ago. "I've had more happiness than anyone deserves. I've been blessed with a husband who loved me completely, children who made me proud every single day, and friends who made life an adventure." The room was filled with the sound of quiet crying, but also with something else: a sense of celebration and profound love that seemed to emanate from Catherine herself. Even in her final hours, she was giving comfort to others instead of asking for sympathy. As the first hints of dawn began to appear through the stained glass windows, Catherine's condition started to deteriorate more rapidly. Dr. Peterson increased her pain medication and quietly prepared the family for what was coming. Her breathing became more irregular, and she drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time she woke up, her eyes sought out William's face. "The music box," she whispered during one of her lucid moments. "Promise me you'll give them the letters when they need them most." William squeezed her hand gently. "I promise, sweetheart. But you need to tell me how I'll know when the right time comes." Catherine smiled weakly. "You'll know. You always know what our children need, even when they don't know it themselves." William thought about the wooden music box that sat on Catherine's dresser at home. It had belonged to her grandmother, who had passed away when Catherine was just 16. Inside the box, hidden beneath the velvet lining, were dozens of letters that Catherine had written over the years. Letters for birthdays she might miss, graduations she might not see, wedding days she might not witness. Each letter was dated and labeled with careful instructions about when it should be opened. "There are letters for the grandchildren too," Catherine continued. "Even the ones we haven't met yet. I wrote them hoping that someday our children would have babies of their own. And I wanted those little ones to know how much their grandmother loved them before they were even born. Sarah leaned closer to hear her mother's words. Mom, you don't have to worry about any of that right now. Just rest. I need to worry about it, Catherine replied with surprising firmness. It's my job to take care of my family, and that job doesn't end just because I'm dying. Emma began to cry again, overwhelmed by her mother's selflessness. Even now, Catherine was thinking about everyone else's needs instead of her own comfort. You've taken care of us our whole lives, Mom. It's okay to let us take care of you now. Catherine reached out with trembling fingers to touch Emma's cheek. Taking care of you is what gives my life meaning. It's not a burden, sweetheart. It's the greatest privilege I've ever had. The chapel continued to fill with people as word spread throughout the community. Catherine's former co-workers from the school district arrived early, before their shifts began. The mail carrier stopped by on his route, bringing a card from the postal workers who had known Catherine for 20 years. Even the young barista from the coffee shop came with a bouquet of sunflowers. Remembering how Catherine always brightened her morning with kind words and genuine interest in her studies. Pastor Matthews was amazed by the steady stream of visitors. In my 30 years of ministry, I've never seen anything like this, he told William. Your wife has built a legacy of love that will live on for generations. William looked around the chapel and felt his heart swell with pride and sadness. He was proud to have been married to a woman who had touched so many lives. But he was devastated by the thought of facing the future without her guidance and companionship. As the morning progressed, Catherine asked to see each of her children privately for a few minutes. She started with Sarah, her eldest, who had always been the responsible one, the caretaker who tried to fix everyone else's problems. Sarah, Catherine said when they were alone, I need you to remember that you can't save everyone. You have such a big heart. But you need to save some of that love and energy for yourself. Sarah had been holding back tears all night, trying to be strong for everyone else, but her mother's words broke down her defenses. I don't know how to stop trying to fix everything, Mom. What if something happens to Dad or Michael or Emma after you're gone? Then you'll support them and love them, but you won't sacrifice your own happiness to solve their problems, Catherine replied firmly. Promise me you'll find joy in your own life, not just in taking care of others. Next, Catherine spoke with Michael, her sensitive middle child who had always felt everything more deeply than other people. Michael, your tender heart is not a weakness, she assured him. The world needs more people who care as much as you do. Michael had struggled with anxiety and depression throughout his teenage years, and Catherine had spent countless hours helping him understand that his emotional depth was actually a gift. I'm scared I'll fall apart after you're gone, Mom. What if I can't handle the sadness? Then you'll ask for help, Catherine said simply. You'll talk to your family, you'll see a counselor if you need to, and you'll remember that grief is just love with nowhere to go. The sadness will prove how much you loved me. Finally, Catherine called Emma to her side. Emma was the baby of the family, the one who had inherited Catherine's sense of humor and optimistic outlook on life. Emma, my sunshine girl, Catherine said with a tired smile. I need you to keep laughing after I'm gone. I need you to find reasons to be happy, even when the world feels dark. Emma couldn't imagine ever laughing again. How can I be happy without you, Mom? You're the one who taught me to find joy in everything. Because the joy I taught you is inside you now, Catherine explained. It doesn't depend on me being here. It's part of who you are, and no one can ever take that away from you. After speaking with each of her children, Catherine felt a sense of peace settling over her. She had said the things that needed to be said, shared the wisdom that had taken her a lifetime to learn, and prepared her family as best she could for the journey ahead. The sun was now fully visible through the chapel windows, painting the walls in brilliant colors that reminded everyone of the beauty that existed even in the midst of sorrow. Catherine looked toward the light and smiled, as if she could see something that the rest of them couldn't quite perceive. It's time for my last prayer, she announced, her voice barely audible but filled with determination. I want all of you to hold hands and pray with me. The entire room joined hands, creating a circle of love that surrounded Catherine's bed. She closed her eyes and began to speak the words that would be her final gift to everyone she was leaving behind. Catherine's final prayer began with words that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. Her voice was weak, but every word carried the weight of a lifetime's worth of faith, love, and gratitude. The entire chapel fell silent except for the soft sound of her whispered words. "Dear God," she began, "I come to you now with a heart full of thanksgiving. Thank you for giving me more years than the doctors thought possible. Thank you for allowing me to see my children grow into amazing adults. Thank you for every sunrise, every laugh, every tear, and every moment of love that has filled my life." William felt tears streaming down his face as he listened to his wife's words. Even in her final moments, she was focusing on gratitude instead of fear or sadness. It was so perfectly Catherine that it almost made him smile through his grief. "I pray for my husband William," Catherine continued, her words growing softer but more intense. "Give him strength to carry on without me. Help him to remember that our love story doesn't end with my death. It just changes form. Let him find joy again, let him laugh again, and when the time is right, let him open his heart to new friendships and experiences." William wanted to protest, to tell her that he could never love anyone else, but he knew she was right. Catherine had always been wise about matters of the heart, and she understood that love grows stronger when it's shared, not when it's locked away in grief. "I pray for my daughter Sarah," Catherine went on. "Help her to understand that she doesn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. Teach her to accept help from others and to find her own happiness instead of always trying to create happiness for everyone else." Sarah squeezed her husband's hand tighter, knowing that her mother's words were exactly what she needed to hear. She had already started making mental lists of things she needed to organize for the family after the funeral, but her mother's prayer reminded her that she needed to take care of herself too. "I pray for my son Michael." Catherine's voice grew even softer. "Give him confidence in his own strength. Help him to see that his sensitivity is a superpower, not a weakness. Let him use his big heart to make the world more compassionate and kind." Michael had spent his whole life feeling like he didn't fit in, like he was too emotional for a man, too sensitive for the real world, but his mother's words wrapped around him like a warm blanket, reminding him that she had always seen his gentleness as a gift. "I pray for my daughter Emma," Catherine whispered. "Keep her laughter alive. Help her to find reasons to smile even when life gets difficult. Let her remember that joy is a choice we make every day, and that choosing happiness is one of the most powerful things we can do." Emma felt her mother's words settle into her heart, like seeds that would grow into strength someday. She couldn't imagine laughing without her mother there to laugh with her, but she knew that Catherine's spirit would live on in every moment of joy she chose to embrace. "I pray for all the people in this room," Catherine continued, her breathing becoming more labored. "Thank you for loving my family. Thank you for being part of our lives. Thank you for coming here tonight to share this sacred moment with us." She paused for a long moment, gathering her remaining strength for the most important part of her prayer. "And God, I pray that everyone I'm leaving behind will remember that death is not the opposite of life. It's just another part of the journey. Help them to see that love never dies, it just transforms into something even more beautiful." William leaned closer to his wife, knowing that her time was running very short. Her breathing had become extremely shallow, and her skin was growing cold despite the warm blankets that covered her, but her eyes were still bright with love and peace. "I'm ready now," Catherine whispered, looking directly at William. "I'm not afraid. I can feel myself getting ready to go somewhere beautiful, somewhere where I'll be waiting for all of you when your time comes." "I love you," William managed to say through his tears. "I've loved you every day for 43 years, and I'll love you every day for the rest of my life. And I'll love you from wherever I'm going," Catherine replied. "Every sunset, every song, every happy memory, I'll be there with you in all of those moments." Dr. Peterson checked Catherine's pulse and gently shook his head at Pastor Matthews. The end was very near now. Pastor Matthews began reciting the Lord's Prayer, and everyone in the chapel joined their voices together in the familiar words that had brought comfort to countless people throughout history. As the prayer ended, Catherine's eyes fluttered closed for the last time. Her breathing became so quiet that William had to lean down to make sure she was still alive. Her hand in his was growing colder, but he refused to let go. "Tell me about the roses again," Catherine whispered so softly that only William could hear her. "We picked out the pink ones," William said, his voice breaking. "The ones that bloom twice a year. You said they would remind us that beautiful things always come back, even after the dark winter months." Catherine smiled without opening her eyes. "Promise me you'll plant them in the spring. Promise me you'll think of our love every time they bloom. "I promise," William said. "I'll plant a whole garden full of roses and I'll tell them stories about you every day." "Good," Catherine breathed. "That makes me happy." The chapel was filled with an atmosphere of profound peace as Catherine's breathing became even more shallow. Everyone present could feel that something sacred was happening, that they were witnessing a soul's transition from this world to the next. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, filling the chapel with golden light that seemed to dance around Catherine's bed. Birds began singing their dawn songs, creating a natural symphony that felt like a celebration of life rather than a mourning of death. Catherine's face was completely peaceful now, as if she was already seeing glimpses of whatever beautiful place was waiting for her. Her final prayer had transformed the entire atmosphere of the chapel from one of sadness to one of hope and thanksgiving. The moment came quietly, like a gentle sigh that carried Catherine's spirit away on wings of love and faith. William felt her hand grow still in his, and he knew that his beloved wife had finally found peace. Dr. Peterson checked for vital signs and nodded solemnly to Pastor Matthews, who bowed his head in a moment of silent prayer. "She's free now," Pastor Matthews said softly. "Catherine has gone home." The chapel filled with the sound of quiet crying, but it wasn't the desperate wailing of despair. Instead, it was the gentle weeping of people who had witnessed something beautiful and sacred. Catherine's death had been as graceful as her life, surrounded by love and filled with dignity. William sat beside his wife's still form for several minutes, memorizing her peaceful expression. Even in death, she looked beautiful, as if she was simply sleeping after a long day of caring for others. He leaned down and kissed her forehead one last time, whispering words of love that only she could hear. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for 43 years of happiness. Thank you for teaching me what real love looks like. Thank you for being the best person I've ever known." Sarah, Michael, and Emma gathered around their father, and for the first time all night, William allowed himself to break down completely. His children wrapped their arms around him, and they held each other as they began the difficult process of learning to live without the woman who had been the center of their universe. Dr. Peterson respectfully handled the medical procedures that needed to be completed, while Pastor Matthews began making phone calls to the funeral home that Catherine had chosen months ago. Even these practical details had been planned by Catherine, who had wanted to spare her family from having to make difficult decisions while they were grieving. As the morning progressed, people began to leave the chapel quietly, each person stopping to offer condolences to the family, but many stayed behind to help with arrangements, proving once again that Catherine's kindness had created a community of people who genuinely cared for each other. Mrs. Patterson organized a group of women to clean the chapel and arranged the flowers for Catherine's funeral service. The men from William's poker group showed up without being asked, ready to help with anything that needed to be done. Emma's friends from high school arrived with food for the family, knowing that no one would think about eating but understanding that they needed nourishment for the difficult days ahead. "This is what Mom always talked about," Sarah said to her brothers as she watched the outpouring of support. "She said that when you spend your life taking care of others, they'll take care of you when you need it most." Michael nodded, feeling overwhelmed by the kindness of their community. "She was right about so many things. I wish I had listened to her more when she was alive." "She knew you were listening," Emma said firmly. "She knew all of us were listening even when we thought we weren't. That's why she wasn't worried about leaving us. She knew she had taught us everything we needed to know." William found himself thinking about the music box and the letters that Catherine had written. He realized that even though she was gone, she had found a way to continue caring for their family. Her love would reach into the future through those carefully written words, offering comfort and guidance when they needed it most. 3 days later, the chapel was packed for Catherine's funeral service. People came from neighboring towns. Former students drove hundreds of miles to pay their respects, and the local newspaper sent a reporter to cover the service of a woman who had touched so many lives. William was amazed to see faces he hadn't seen in years, all drawn together by their shared love for his wife. Pastor Matthews delivered a eulogy that captured Catherine's spirit perfectly. He talked about her quiet strength, her infectious laughter, and her ability to see the best in everyone she met. He shared stories that made people laugh through their tears, remembering the woman who had brought so much joy to their community. Catherine Anderson didn't just live in this town, Pastor Matthews said. She helped create the heart and soul of this community. She showed us all what it means to love without conditions, to give without expecting anything in return, and to find hope in even the darkest circumstances. After the service, the family gathered at William and Catherine's home for the first time since her death. The house felt different without her presence, quieter and somehow smaller, but it was still filled with evidence of her love, photographs on every surface, handmade crafts from their children's childhood, and the beautiful garden that she had tended for decades. That evening, when the last visitors had gone home, William sat in Catherine's favorite chair and opened the wooden music box. Inside, exactly where she had said they would be, were dozens of letters written in her careful handwriting. Each envelope was labeled, with specific instructions about when it should be opened: for Sarah's wedding day, for Michael when he becomes a father, for Emma's graduation from college, for William on our 50th anniversary. The letters went on, covering every important milestone that Catherine might miss and many ordinary days when her family might simply need to hear her voice again. William held the letters carefully, understanding that these were precious gifts that would help his family heal in the months and years to come. Catherine had found a way to mother her children and love her husband even from beyond the grave. 6 months later, when Sarah announced her engagement, William gave her the letter marked for Sarah's wedding day. Sarah read it alone in her childhood bedroom, crying and laughing as her mother's words reminded her of everything she had learned about love, marriage, and happiness. The letter was full of practical advice, loving encouragement, and stories about Sarah's childhood that only a mother would remember. When Michael struggled with depression the following winter, William gave him a letter marked for Michael when the world feels too heavy. Catherine's words reminded him of his own strength and gave him permission to ask for help when he needed it. The letter included a list of all the times he had overcome difficult challenges, proof that he was stronger than he realized. Emma opened her letter on a day when she couldn't stop crying, when the grief felt too overwhelming to bear. For Emma, when you can't remember how to smile, was written in Catherine's flowing script. Inside, Catherine had written about all the things that had made Emma laugh as a child, reminding her that joy was still possible even in the midst of sorrow. 2 years after Catherine's death, William planted the rose garden they had planned together. As he worked in the soil, he told Catherine about everything that had happened since she had been gone. He shared news about their children's successes and struggles, updates about friends and neighbors, and his own journey through grief toward acceptance. The roses bloomed magnificently that spring, filling the air with fragrance that reminded William of Catherine's perfume. He found himself talking to the flowers every morning, sharing his thoughts and feelings with the woman who would always be the love of his life. On what would have been their 45th wedding anniversary, William opened his own letter from Catherine. "For William, when you're ready to live again," the envelope read. Inside, Catherine had written about their love story, about the happiness they had shared, and about her hopes for his future. She gave him permission to find companionship again, to travel to places they had dreamed of visiting, and to embrace whatever joy life might still hold for him. "Our love doesn't end because I'm gone," she had written. "It just becomes part of everything beautiful that you do from now on. Live for both of us, my darling. Live with double the joy, double the laughter, and double the love." Years later, when William was an old man himself, he would tell his grandchildren about their grandmother, Catherine. He would show them the chapel where she had died with such grace and dignity, and he would take them to the rose garden that bloomed faithfully every spring. He would read them letters that Catherine had written for children she had never met, sharing her wisdom and love across the years. The chapel still stands today, and Catherine's memory lives on in the countless lives she touched. Her legacy isn't measured in monuments or achievements, but in the ripples of kindness that continue to spread through her community. Every act of compassion, every moment of selfless love, every prayer spoken in that sacred space carries a bit of Catherine Anderson's spirit forward into the future. William kept his promise to plant the roses, and they bloomed twice every year, just as Catherine said they would. Beautiful things do come back, even after the darkest winters, and love truly never dies. It just transforms into something even more beautiful than before.